guys, it's Mimberly and welcome back to the channel. So, last time we finished off Zane's, I realised I was a massive idiot and I did not actually upload the first one of Xavier even though I recorded it, and I forgot to edit it and render it. So, that will be out by the time that this video drops, but we're going to start Rafayel's today. So, a unique Vermillion, which if I remember correctly is a shade of red, if I remember correctly, right? No, why are you opening 50 tabs? Vermillion red, if I know correctly. Ah! Yeah, it's like a, how do I explain red? It's like kind of like a reddy orange. Literally just had to Google that. Don't judge me. Okay, right. Enough talking. I've got a cup of tea. It's time to chill and just read. And plus, I think you guys actually quite like it when I read it out, because it saves you guys from reading it, but hey ho, what do I know? I don't know why you lot watch my fucking videos. I just make them. Okay. Thomas's art exhibition begins in a week. Rafayel's art covers almost all the walls except for one. Thomas announced that on the opening day, Rafayel's magnum opus would be there. However, until then, no one can see it, not even his sponsors. Of course, only Thomas knows that Rafayel's magnum opus is still... He finally finds Rafayel in the storage room after running around for a long time. Thomas stops to catch his breath. He wipes off the sweat from his forehead with one hand and airs himself with his collar. "You're here. Not going to take a bath today?" Rafayel doesn't spare Thomas a glance, his eyes focused on the building in front of him. It's a fortress made of thousands of identical pieces of fishbone, each tower a different height. I knew you'd bother me, so I locked the bathroom door from the inside, but then I forgot to go in. Rafayel weighs a small bone in his hand, thinks for a bit, and then places it on the top left corner of the fortress. Thomas furrows his eyebrows. "And the key?" "I don't know. Fish brain," Thomas mutters. He takes note of what Rafayel is building. "You haven't even finished your painting yet. Why are you making this?" "Maybe it's because I can't paint right now." Feeling anxious, Thomas feels any work of Rafayel's is a masterpiece. He takes a step. "This is pretty good. Why don't we use this as your final piece? People can also see our great painter's installation art." Rafayel glanced at him. "You want me to rebuild this at the expedition? It's 2,000 pieces. I don't have that much time." Thomas deflates like a balloon. He massages his temples and says, "The sponsors called me again today. They're very worried about the situation regarding the final piece. I know you don't care about these things, but it's not just about you. It's also about my reputation. We can't mess this up." Rafayel picks up a large fishbone, holds it in the air, and then puts it back on the table. He focuses on the building, completely ignoring Thomas. Seeing Rafayel ignore him, Thomas becomes exasperated and says, "You've been painting for a while. Why don't you let me take a look?" Inside the studio, a painting as tall as the wall is covered in wet paint, filling the air with the smell of minerals. Thomas fancies himself as someone who understands art, but if he's being honest with himself, he can't tell what's missing from this piece. It's already good enough. Thomas snacks back from his gaze and asks, "Isn't this perfect already?" "It's missing a color." Rafayel massages his temples, looking distressed. "Without that, this painting isn't complete." "Is one color really important? It's already pretty stunning. Why don't we just display this first and add the color after?" Thomas withdraws himself from the painting, his mind filled with many thoughts. "Paintings I haven't finished will never be released to the public." Rafayel glances at Thomas's expression. "Don't even think about it. If you move this painting, I'll burn it." "Jesus Christ, Rafayel." Thomas purses his lips. "You're a man of your word. Fine, but there has to be a deadline. How about 2 or 3? 2 days or 3. I can't give you any more than that." Closing his eyes, Rafayel nods. 3 days pass in the blink of an eye. Thomas still hasn't heard from Rafayel. With no other alternatives, he returns to the island. On a beach not so far away, a thick branch dances across the sand. The man holding it stands up from time to time to look at the drawing. "I've said it before and I'll say it again. Everything is ready. Why would I lie to you?" Thomas shifts his phone from left to right and then right to left. "You know his temper. No one can see the painting until the opening of the expedition. You're all the same." Entering his call with the sponsor's manager, Thomas walks towards the man drawing on the beach. It's been 3 days, Thomas says when he's close to Rafayel. Mr. Artist, we have 4 days left until the expedition. What are you doing? Did you go blind already? Rafayel stands up and prompts the branch up with his right hand. At his feet, a drawing of the sea is in the sand. If only you drew this at the expedition. What's the point of having it here? After admiring his work, Thomas quickly asks, did you find that colour? Rafayel slams the stick into the sand twice. If I did, I wouldn't be drawing here, he says, slightly frustrated. Sighing, Thomas puts his hands on his waist. Let's go to my friend's pigment factory. There are thousands of colours there. You're bound to find the one you want. No, Rafayel says. Those have been chosen countless times by other people. I will never let them be in my paintings. Thomas sighs. I knew you'd be like this. I wouldn't have suggested this if I could afford to wait any longer. Cackling, he continues in a wistful tone. You were like this when we first met. Looking up at the endless blue sea, Thomas closes his eyes. I remember, back then I compared myself to you. Thomas recalls that time when he was still passionate about art. At a charity event, his painting just so happened to be displayed among Rafayel's. Thomas had heard of Rafayel before. He thought he stood a chance against him. If his painting sold for a price higher than Rafayel's, then he would have been famous overnight. With that thought, Thomas went to the exhibit, English is not my first language, early. This time their works were quite similar in tone. Comparing the two, he noticed Rafayel's was more unique, yet he didn't want to admit it. Thomas always thought his work was better than everyone else's. But those who approached the two paintings only admired Rafayel's and ignored Thomas's. Thomas reassured himself these people only cared about Rafayel's name. They didn't know anything about the true meaning of art. Near the end of the exhibit, an old man approached the paintings. Thomas recognized this old man as a famous art collector. Finally, someone who knew art. When the old man stopped in front of the two paintings, his eyes looked only at Rafayel's piece. Such a passionate colour. Only Mr. Rafayel could convey emotions like this. Thomas was consumed by jealousy. Mr. Thomas's painting is pretty good too, right? The old man took his glasses off. He glanced at Thomas's painting, waved his hand and said, "The red's off." Thomas's painting wasn't sold for a good price that night. It was that same night he decided to let himself visit Rafayel. Oh, okay. Rafayel only let him in when he heard Thomas was also an artist. That was the first time Thomas met him. Thomas wanted to have an artistic discussion with Rafayel about colours, but Rafayel just didn't seem interested. He just sat at his desk, mixing colours in paper cups. Thomas asked if he knew his painting would have sold at a high price. Without lifting his head, Rafayel asked which one. The one at the charity event. Oh. At his lukewarm response, Thomas was confused. Do you not want to know how much you sold it for? As long as it benefits the charity, I don't care how much money it makes, Rafayel said, then mumbled something about the paint lacking something. He picked up his brush and looked for some colour on his palette. Recalling the old man's critique, Thomas asked, what brand of paint did you use? As if he had never heard of that word before, Rafayel finally looked up at Thomas. Brand? Worried that Rafayel wouldn't tell him, Thomas decided to lay out his choice of paints first. Madeline, Bailey, Curio, those are the brands I use. I'll trade some with you. Rafayel stirred the contents of the paper cup with a small brush. It took him a while to say, thanks, but I can make it myself. Thomas took a deep breath. Is this the attitude of a famous artist? How did you make the red in your painting then? He asked. Rafayel made a line on a piece of paper with the paint from the paper cup. Satisfied, he looked up at Thomas again. Are you here because you want to learn from me? Hearing this, Thomas felt a little bit irritated, but he knew that he had to learn the truth. He had to let go of his pride. You tell me, I'll make you even more famous. Rafayel took the paint he mixed to his canvas. I don't paint for fame. Thomas returned to the present, opening his eyes to gaze at how the waves lapped the sand. He feels sentimental. After that, I studied business to become your manager. To be honest with you, I was stunned the first time I saw your work. I couldn't believe that someone as talented as you existed. So I believe in your talent. You wouldn't be stopped by artist block. Turning back, Thomas's words stop in his throat. Rafayel's figure moves further and further away, eventually becoming a small dot in the distance. Fucking hell, she just walks away. With 2 days left until the expedition, Thomas decides to take matters into his own hands. Cover his Darkness covers the sea and the island, and the studio is lit up by the moonlight filtering through the window. Thomas sneaks inside. He glances around and he doesn't see any signs of Rafayel. He fixes his gaze on the giant painting leaning against the wall. His footsteps are silent as he moves towards it. He puts on the gloves he brought with him, kneels, and tries to pick up the painting. Right at this moment, someone comes out from the shadows. The air is filled with the sound of a match being lit. Well, what are you doing with that match? Rafayel glares at Thomas. If that painting moves even 1 centimeter, I will light it on fire. Okay, fine, don't do it. Thomas takes several steps back. Rafayel, match in hand, stands near the painting. His gaze doesn't leave Thomas. With the match so close to the painting, Thomas's heart almost leaps out of his chest. Partly it says, I moved it at most 9 millimeters. It hasn't even moved a centimeter, you can see for yourself. Raphael's gaze shifts, but he doesn't look at the painting. Rather, he stares at Thomas's feet. Move, you're stepping on my conch. The wooden board Raphael has slept on since noon rests in the corner. Thomas turns on the light and moves it aside. How can you even sleep on it? Are you seriously doing this just so you can guard your painting? The lights flicker on. Thomas notices what Raphael is holding. A conch he's never seen before. He clicks his tongue, puts his arms on his waist and glares at Raphael. There are 2 days until the expedition and you're here trying seafood? Raphael looks at Thomas for a few moments before he says, do you think nothing else other than eating nature's creations when you see them? Thomas takes a moment to think. You want to use it as paint? Yep. Raphael wipes the conch with the utmost care. Color I need might be in here. Thomas, after a moment of shock, grabs Raphael's arms. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and start painting! Raphael pulls his arm away and says, I can't paint right now. It will take me at least 3 days to get the paint out. 3 days? Thomas felt as though he had been struck by lightning. Taking deep breaths, he says, is it possible to extract the color in 1 day? Raphael pats Thomas's shoulder. Nope. Excitement fades from Thomas's face. On the night before the expedition, Thomas calls Raphael for the 10th time, but to no avail. He takes a deep breath. He knew he'd be like this. Thankfully, Thomas has a plan. It's not the greatest plan, but at this rate, he has to give it a go. Ooh. It's been 3 days since the end of the expedition. A mountain of conches sits in the corner of the studio, leading up to an assortment of paints. Pieces of conch shells are scattered across the floor. Raphael stands in front of the painting with a brush. In his left hand, a roughly thumb-sized blotch of colour stands out among his colourful palette. Thomas drifts into Raphael's studio with a smile. He sits at the coffee table and pours himself a cup of coffee. Glancing at Raphael, he says, still smiling, you don't need to keep painting, the expedition's over. Raphael doesn't turn around. He drags his brush across the painting. I hung a frame on the wall, gave it a weird name, and called it a day. Everyone who came said it was the pinnacle of art. Who knew that a magnum opus could be so easily replaced with a frame? And maybe I do still have some artistic talent in me. Seeing Raphael ignoring him, Thomas' excitement fades. Putting down his coffee, Thomas goes up to Raphael and looks at his painting. There are a few more touches of a reddish blue or purple in Raphael's painting. It's the same bright colour but on his palette. Thomas furrows his brow. Is this the colour you've been looking for? Yes, Raphael replies. Thomas takes a step back to take in the whole painting and then he moves closer. I can't tell the difference between this and the claret violet from the factories. Raphael looks at him speechless. Thomas glances at the conch shells nearby and asks, did you extract the colour from those? Yeah, it's called Tyrone Purple. It took 10,000 conches to get 1 gram. It's a completely different colour from claret violet. You can't tell the difference, Mr. Manager? Thomas scratches his head. Tyrone Purple, right, I know. Decades of art history have long since faded from Thomas's mind, but he vaguely remembers that Tyrone Purple is a shade more precious than gold, used only by ancient royal families. But this colour isn't rare anymore, Thomas says. After all, technology is so advanced now. It is rare though. Raphael dabs his paintbrush and paints another stroke onto the painting. Do you remember the Vermillion you were looking for so many years ago? Thomas doesn't turn around. It's been so many years I gave up looking for it. Besides, no matter how much I try, I could never mix a colour as great as yours. He snorts. A unique Vermillion. Does that even exist? Of course it does, Raphael says. Vermillion is a super rare colour in ancient times. You should know. Well, yes, because the process back then wasn't as developed and they didn't have the technology. They could only use bugs to make that colour, so they'd need to take into account the cost of catching them and storing the materials. It's a very expensive process, so of course it was rare. Thomas continues to calculate the total cost. It being labour intensive is one thing, but that's not the reason it's rare. Adding another stroke to the painting, Raphael continues, an insect can only give so much red to a painter's work. The vermilion nowadays can be easily synchronized with chemicals. Thomas doesn't understand Raphael's point. Isn't that great though? More people can paint though. More paintings have the same pigment made at some factory at the same time with the same chemicals and formulas, Raphael says. No matter how much these people mix or tweak their pigments, they will always be confined to a set of rules. The colour they make no longer comes from a unique bug, just how like claret violet doesn't come from a unique conch. With that, Thomas finally understands. The works of the painters in the days of yore are priceless because of the sincerity of their paintings. No one can reproduce their works, which makes them unique. There's nothing more precious than being one of a kind in this world. The same goes for colour. With the last smear of Tyrant Purple, Raphael puts away his brush and looks at Thomas. This is the unique colour I found. Thomas is dumbfounded. He looks back at Raphael's painting, Tyrant Purple and all, and it does seem a little different. Thomas can't tell what exactly had changed, but he knows this will be one of the most precious paintings in the world. A few months later, Raphael's painting is displayed at a grand exhibition. A young and inspiring artist stands in front of the artwork and sneers. They say the most fantastical part of this piece is the reddish purple, but I don't see the difference between this and the one I mix with normal paints. After sending a businessman away with a smile, Thomas frowns. He walks up to the painter, straightens his posture, and says, "Let me tell you, sir. This painting before you with that reddish purple is painted by the one and only Mr. Rafayel. He extracted this unique colour from 10,000 conches, completely different from the manufactured one in your painting. And what makes this shade fantastical, That's what makes this shade fantastical, and that's one of the reasons why Mr. Rafayel is legendary." Huh! Okay, so Raphael is not just a sissy princess. He actually gives a shit, and he puts a lot more effort into his paintings than we thought, huh? I'm not gonna lie though, I would love it if, say for example, Love and Deepspace made like some Raphael paintings and then sold them like as prints or like as actual genuine pieces of artwork. Because how cool would it be to have like a painting heavily inspired by Love and Deepspace in your home? Like, don't get me wrong, I love art. Like, you can tell I've got a frame up there. I've actually got a frame over here. And I've got a frame there, which, to be honest, I should probably rotate. But honestly, that was actually quite interesting because I didn't think of it that way. Like, I didn't think that the way to kind of see things on that would be, oh yeah, by the way, you can just go to a shop and just buy the paint, but the fact that it's unique because you've made that paint. Huh. That wasn't so much on his lore. That was more so like how he met Thomas and things like that, who's his manager. So I think we're gonna get a bit more like in depth with things next time. So I'm looking forward to reading that. But I have got to go and get Zane's story art done now that I actually feel well enough to do it after the last two anecdotes that we've read, because those were traumatic as heck. And it was not too fun. Thank you guys for watching anyway. For those of you who haven't already seen it, the Rafayel Bond is available in early access. If you've seen this video within 12 hours before the other one releases. And the Silas myth and the Xavier myth is coming later on this week, so keep an eye out for it. As well as the Zane myth and the Rafayel myth, which I was planning on to get up last week, but I was having computer blue screen problems, and it took me about 2 days to get that fixed. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys again in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye!